Welcome to today's webinar where we'll be talking all about Dynamics 365 adoption. So adoption is a critical part of any Dynamics 365 project, but it is often overlooked and not given as much attention as it needs. So this deck is designed as a guide to help you design and execute your adoption plan. And today we're going to walk through it and understand the different tasks involved and how to successfully run an adoption plan alongside a project. So using this framework, it doesn't need to be cumbersome or overly complex. It's a fairly simple set of tasks, but ensuring that these are completed will have a huge impact on your return on investment in Dynamics 365, making sure the project is a success and you have engaged and happy users as a result. So we'll look at various stages in the process. So first of all, how do we assemble a team? Who needs to be in that team? And how do we get the right makeup of that team? Then we'll look at how we define a strategy and some key scenarios. So what problems are we trying to solve with this project and how can we tie those into our adoption journey? Then we'll look at the readiness of the organisation, and that goes for both leadership, but also end users, technical teams, support teams as well. So we'll see how we need to engage with those various stakeholders. Then we will build a plan. So what does that look like in terms of maybe a pilot program, getting champions ready, understanding how we're going to execute that change. And then we'll look at how we onboard employees. So how are we going to train them? How are we going to collect feedback? How are we going to measure success? Because they're all key things to making sure we get the outcomes that we need. If we don't measure it, we can't prove whether it's a success or not at the end of the project. So here we're looking at the key teams that are going to be involved in this project. So we've got our executive sponsors, success owners, our early adopters, and our champions. So how do we find out who the right people are for those roles, and how do we support them through the process? That's what we're going to learn and understand today. So we can use a template like this to identify the members of our team, outline their responsibilities. It's important that that's really clear. So each of those individuals within the team knows what their role is and how they're going to contribute to the project. So we can see in the list there, we've outlined the typical makeup of what our adoption team needs to look like by role. So we've got executive sponsors, success owner, project manager, etc. In smaller deployments, some of those roles might be fulfilled by the same individual. And for larger teams, we might have multiple champions and training leads, for example. But it's important that each of those roles is filled by someone and they know what their responsibilities are and what their part's going to be in this project. So next up is about identifying scenarios and then prioritizing those. So the key here is that we're looking for the purpose of the project. So this is not technical. This is how we're going to engage with users and really make them buy into the system and believe in it. So again, we've got a template here that allows us to identify those scenarios, what are the drivers really for the project, and then identify how that applies to the organisation as an individual. So how's it going to benefit the end user and what's it going to do for them? So our example here is we need to be more productive when we're out and about on the road. And how it's going to apply to this organisation is when sales teams are out in the field, they can easily access data, update it, and do that from any device. So it's going to unblock lots of scenarios. It's going to prevent them from having to go back and do admin when they get home or back to the office. So we're really starting to kind of embed the why into the project and make that resonate with our end users. So first thing we need to do once we've assembled that team and identified who those individuals are is have a meeting, host a workshop, and within this we're going to delve into challenges, strategies and goals. So it's important that we've assembled our team correctly. So we've got departmental heads in there, we've got end users, we've got IT, and we want to get everyone together. So we don't want those different roles that we've identified operating in silos. The idea here is we have one workshop, doesn't have to be ridiculously long, but we get everyone together and we use some questions like we've got identified here to drive that conversation. So what are your major challenges and pain points? What data do you rely on? If you had a magic wand, what could you change? So lots of nice open questions that will elicit good feedback from those stakeholders, and we can capture all of that and then start to use that for our adoption planning. So you might find some really kind of specific answers to those questions when you're talking to particularly kind of champion and end user groups. But we can really use those to drive the adoption strategy. So if we can pick up on some of those strands and weave that into our adoption plan, we're going to get much better buy-in from users within that group, rather than just the message coming from leadership. You've got a new system coming and you have to use it. That's not going to resonate with most people. If the message is, we've listened to your pain point and we're going to solve it by doing this, then we're going to free up your time, allow you to be more productive, whatever it might be, that's a much better message that we're sending to our end user group there. So then we're looking at taking those scenarios and documenting them. This is a format we can use. So as someone in a particular team, I want to achieve this thing using this technology. And I know that I will have been successful when this outcome happens. So what we're not trying to do here is gather requirements for a project. So we're not trying to design the software. This is on a personal level for that individual. What are we trying to achieve and what does success look like? So this is an exercise that forms part of the adoption plan, which should be separate from a kind of more technical discovery exercise. But once we've captured what those scenarios are, we can then prioritize them. And again, we can do this interactively with our adoption team that we've assembled. So everyone continuing to buy into this process, and we're kind of layering up that buy-in by getting them involved in these different activities and workshops. This is a really good one to do with sticky notes up on a whiteboard or on a wall. But we can take those scenarios and say, well, how impactful do we think it is and how hard do we think it is? And that allows us to then prioritize those. And clearly, we want to hit the highest impact scenarios hardest within our kind of adoption plan and communications. So next important step then is about establishing a benchmark for different KPIs. So if we don't measure something, we don't know whether it's improved or not, and we can't improve it without measuring it. So it's really important that we do this up front. Again, doesn't have to be a particularly laborious task, but if we write it down now, we can then refer back to that and measure against that key performance indicator. If we don't do that, we've got nothing to prove success at the end of the journey here. So this template will help us to define what that success criteria looks like. So what's it called? How often are we going to report on it? How do we come up with the score for that particular KPI? Is there a formula involved? Are we getting data from multiple sources, for example? Ideally, we want these to be simple, but some things are harder to measure. So we can define that at this point. Where's that data coming from? How are we going to gather it? So if it's kind of quantitative versus qualitative, there's different ways of gathering that data. That might be reporting out of a system, or it might be running a survey, for example. So we need to think about how we're going to gather that data, if we need to transform it at all, and how we're going to analyze it. And that comes through to those data gathering instruments as well. Is it surveys? Is it data from a database, etc.? And then finally, who's going to own that? So it's important that there's ownership for each of the kind of key tasks within here. And going back to the team matrix at the start, when we're defining the responsibilities, part of that is who takes ownership for which part of the adoption plan. So once we've established what the KPI is and how we're going to measure it, we then need to establish a benchmark. So what does it look like now? And that's our baseline that we're then going to improve on. So here we're looking at what the success criteria are, what the method is that is going to drive the improvement of that particular KPI, and where do we want to get it from and to. So in this example, we want new revenue from existing customers going up from 15% to 20%. So we're going to improve our cross-sell and upsell by implementing some new tools here. Those benchmarks can be anything, so that's you to define. These are just examples, but having that benchmark to measure against. So without that, we can't then prove success at the end of the journey. Then we want to put a scorecard together. Again, this is a really useful template. So taking that data and put it into a measurable scorecard. In there, identifying who owns that, where the data is coming from, pulling the KPI formula from the work we've done previously, and then identifying what the baseline is and what the target is. And then as we track that adoption journey, once the implementation is complete, we can see whether we're achieving that target or not. But again, without that baseline, we can't measure that. So next up, really important, how are we going to report on that success? So first of all, who are we going to report to? So yeah, a steering committee is a really great idea where we get a kind of diverse group of stakeholders together from different levels of the organisation. So yeah, this is an example, but a very good one in terms of having a Dynamics 365 steering committee. How often are we going to report on the results from our KPI monitoring monthly in this instance? And how are we going to do that? Is it a face-to-face meeting? Is it a Teams meeting? Is it a platform like Viva Engage? And what format are we going to present that in? Typically a PowerPoint deck will do the job. So now we understand how we're going to measure success. Next up, we need to look at the readiness of the organisation. So that's both technical readiness, but also readiness of the people as well. So again, we've got some templates here that will help you through that process. So first of all, we're looking at organisational factors here. So again, we've got some good leading questions here that we can put to our adoption team that we've assembled. So this would be a separate workshop to the one we mentioned earlier. And we want to really think deeply about these things. So when was the last time you adopted a new technology, and what made it a success or not a success, equally as importantly? So we're learning from previous initiatives. So hopefully there's some good stuff in there. There's probably some bad stuff in there as well. But it doesn't really matter what that implementation was. Really, we want to know from a kind of people and process perspective why it worked or why it didn't. We want to look at other change in the organisation as well. So there are other big projects taking place that we need to consider. Do we need to kind of phase this, or do we need to make sure that we've got ring-fenced resources that can work on each of those initiatives? So we need to understand the kind of bigger picture of change that's happening in the organisation. Then we need to look at people. So what type of resources exist that can be leveraged for this adoption plan? So who's going to do the communication? Who's going to be in that kind of team of people that are understanding and championing that change? How's training going to work? Who's going to nominate themselves to run some kind of leadership events? Those kinds of things. And then we need to look at the risks and the benefits of the dynamic solution. So how can we kind of really shout and highlight those benefits and make them kind of really bold so everyone understands them? And that's the real kind of driver for everyone buying into the project. And equally, how can we mitigate any risks that we can foresee? So we've potentially uncovered some there around previous failings or other big changes that are happening, but there'll be other risks as well that we need to think about, and we need to think about ways to mitigate those early so we can really be kind of shouting about the successes and not fighting fires. So next up, really, really important is getting to the purpose of the project. So what's the why? So we can deliver as many kind of fancy technical tools as we want, lots of bells and whistles, and invest lots of money in delivering those things and building those things, but without individuals being able to tie that to their own purpose, they're not going to use those tools and they're not going to adopt them. So this is really key, this understanding of your why. So ask a couple of questions here, again, in a workshop format using this template. So how's Dynamics going to benefit the organisation? So is it going to support the customer-centric strategy? Is it going to allow you to deliver a better service? Is it going to allow you to sell a more diverse set of products and services to your customers? Each organisation is going to be unique, so you need to spend some time thinking about these things, but get those written down, and then we can always refer back to them when we're going through the kind of change management and communication piece of this journey. This is all great collateral that we can use to reinforce that message and just keep talking about it and keep getting that buy-in. And then next is, how is Dynamics 365 going to benefit the individual employee? So again, these need to resonate with individuals that hopefully they will have come from them personally, and again we can use them to reinforce that message when we're doing the comms piece later on. So here, as an individual, being able to update sales information while I'm out and about means I don't need to spend my evenings doing admin. So there's a real human connection there. You save them time in the evening, they can spend more time with their family or on their hobby or whatever it might be. But if we can get to that real why, so there's no, that doesn't matter what the technology is there, it's about them getting that time back. That's great content that we can then use in the communications part of the plan. Next up, we're going to look at impact on specific teams. So again, we want to understand this early so we can make a plan and include any key changes in our training plan and our awareness communications. So gathering this early is going to be important because we can use it then throughout the adoption initiative. So we've got an example here of the sales team. So they're going to be using a mobile app instead of an old system. Security requirements are going to change. So those are changes that we need to talk about and make end users aware of, so that they're not surprised when they come effectively. So it's even before training, that awareness piece that comes before that is these things are going to change. The reasons they're going to change are this, which we've already identified. This is how it's going to benefit you as an individual. So tying back to that why piece. And then when it comes to training and actually using these systems, it's not a surprise or something that's been pushed down onto them. They've been involved in that process and they can see the purpose and the driver behind that. Okay, now this is another important one. So it's really important to get leadership involved in the project from the start, and they need to outwardly and openly and actively demonstrate their support and their alignment on the goals of the project, the timelines of the project, and the outcomes and objectives that we're trying to achieve. So again, we've got a template here that you can use to capture those areas of alignment. And also where there's misalignment as well, because those are things that we need to address up front and mitigate. If there's doubt over the timeline, or we think it's going to negatively impact a particular team in some way, we want to understand that now and understand what the implications of that are, so we can communicate that and mitigate those risks as part of our plan. So next up is about building an awareness plan. So who needs to be informed? What do they need to know? And how are we going to tell them? What's the best way to get that information out there? And again, that's more of a challenge now than it's ever been, with a lot more distributed and remote teams out there. So we need really careful consideration. So first up, who needs to know? So who's going to be directly impacted by this project? So if we're putting a CRM system in, very likely it's the sales team. But depending on what the implementation is, there could be a wider group there as well. And we need to think about people that are going to be kind of indirectly affected by this project as well. Who's going to drive the change forward? So is that sales managers? Is it the leadership team? Hopefully, there's going to be champions within those teams as well. So we need to identify who those people are and who's going to support that change. Is that the IT team? Is it support with an external partner as well? What does that support network look like effectively that sits around the project? Because all of these people in all three categories need to be informed as part of the plan. Okay, then what do they need to know? So as the project transitions, their plans for retiring an old system. How's what does the go live plan for the new system look like? What data is going to be moving around? Those kinds of things. So we need to think about what they need to know. And when we're thinking about that, we're always trying to tie that back to the purpose piece that we've already captured earlier. So what were those key scenarios? What was the why behind the project? So this is kind of factual information that they need to know, but we can still tie that back to the purpose piece as well. And what they need to know about the future. So what's the new environment going to look like? What's their role in it? What new processes are there going to be? What new technology is going to be available? So will they have a mobile app available, or will they have some new interface that they've got to work with? We need to make them aware of that. Then we need to think about how we're going to communicate with those people. So it's going to vary between organisations, but what are the best channels? Email, social, Teams, in person, whatever. what's the preferred channel? So, we're going to have a big face-to-face meeting. We've got an off-site planned. The people really engage with our Viva Engage tool. You'll know your people and what's the best way to get information to them. What's the best timing for that? So if we've already got a meeting that's got a regular cadence that we can create an agenda item for that's regular, that we can keep people up to date with the project, then let's use that. We don't want to add another recurring meeting into people's diaries because we know how busy they are. So if we've got an existing kind of framework, let's use that. Otherwise, we'll need to design something new. And what resources can we use to support that communication? So again, hopefully lots of the information we've already gathered, but there's also information out there from Microsoft, and a deck like this will help you to plan that as well. So next up, we're looking at a training strategy. So as you can see here, before we build a plan, we want to understand who we're going to be training, what they need to know, why they need to know it. Again, tying back to the purpose, and how they would like to learn, what's going to be best for them and what's going to be best practically. So use this template, fill in these boxes, because these are the key things to consider. So what tools are they using at the moment? How technically literate are those audiences, and that might be different in different teams. But if you've got people that are comfortable with technology, then lean on them to be your champions. What other change programs are in place? Can we tie this training in with that? Do we need to think about waiting until after that's happened and overload people with too much training? If there's complementary training out there, can we tie this in? And what are people's preferences in terms of training? Is it kind of short, snappy online courses? Is it face-to-face training where they can detach themselves from their day job and really focus on it? Again, that'll be different for different teams and different organisations. So you'll know the best answer to that. Okay, then who needs to be trained? So we looked a bit about the impacted audiences earlier. So from a training standpoint, who needs to know about this? So in a CRM deployment, typically sales, marketing, IT, etc. Who is going to drive that change forward? That's a really important one. So going right back to the start, where we identified our team and what their roles and responsibilities are. We've got our early adopters, we've got our champions, we've got our executive sponsor, got our steering committee. They're all really key individuals or groups of individuals that are going to drive this forward. So they've got to be the champions. They've got to be shouting about it. They've got to be excited about it, and really kind of pull everyone along with them. And then again, who's going to support that? So anyone supporting the solution or supporting the users is going to need training on that as well. Then we need to think about what those people need to learn. So again, what is going to be changing? Are there new processes in there? Are there new tools in there? How is that going to affect a transition from an old system to a new system, or an old process to a new process? And then what do we need to know for the future state? What new skills do we need? What new tools do we need? Okay, then again, we need to understand how we're going to deliver that training. So a bit like the communications piece, how we're going to deliver that. So what channels are there? How do we prefer that to be delivered? What's the best timing? Talked earlier about, is it short, sharp sessions, or is it blocks of time where we can get away from the day job? And what material are we're gonna have to support that process? So now we need to build out our early adopter and champions programs. So these are two of the most important groups of people in the organization when you're going through any kind of change. They're not necessarily obvious, not always kind of managers and leaders, but the people that are excited about what's coming, they really understand the why and the purpose and those scenarios we mapped out earlier, and they're excited about it, and they're going to, that's infectious. They're going to bring other people along on that journey with them. So first of all, we've got a bit of a checklist here that you can use for identifying those early adopters. So we want a diverse group. We want them to come from different places within the organisation. We want them to be advocates of the organisation, and you'll know from your own teams the people that really kind of bleed the company, and will be the ones that will embrace that change and can see that it's strategically beneficial and help to drive it forward. Then when we're picking those scenarios, use the prioritization exercise that we did before to pick the high priority ones and really lean on those. Get those in front of your early adopters, and they can see real impact there. And then again, that is infectious and will disseminate to the rest of the teams. And feedback's really important. We really advocate Viva Engage. Teams is also good, but any kind of shared space where people can tell and shout about good stories. So this new thing is much better than the old way of doing it for this reason. And again, we've got all of the material that we collected earlier, so it's saving me time in the evening because I haven't got to do my admin when I get home or whatever. Those are all really good stories, and if we've got a platform to spread those, then that's great. Also collecting feedback in a more unstructured way as well. So getting around and talking to those people, seeing what it's like on the ground, getting some real stories is really useful. It's useful to do that in a group as well, so people can share feedback within that group. And then the final point there about adjusting and fine tuning the plan. So there's some really good template here for coming up with the plan, but things change. You're not going to get it right first time, so be willing to flex that plan, whether that's from good feedback or bad feedback. That's all constructive. We might want to change the kind of cadence of communications, or we might anchor to a different scenario that resonates better. All of those things, we've got the capability to be adaptable and flexible with that. That's our early adopters and our champions. This is who we're looking for enthusiastic people. We want to give them a platform to share that enthusiasm and shout about success. We want to make sure champions are talking to each other and to the project team. So again, we can weave that feedback into the process. We want to reward them. We want to give them opportunities to speak in front of their colleagues. Often we're looking for the people that are willing to kind of get up and talk about their successes and their challenges. And there's no harm in creating a bit of competition in there as well. So some really good adoption programs where there's kind of branded kind of project branded prizes up for grabs for the early adopters and the champions and the users that use the system most at the start, those kinds of things. So we could make it fun, add a bit of fun into there, and that goes a long way as well. So to summarize then, everything we talked about here does take some time. It doesn't take a lot of time compared to the return that you'll get, but it's absolutely very well worth it. And this deck, Ask for a Copy, is a really good guide of walking through the steps there from that initial identifying the scenarios and the vision and the purpose to then anchoring that to a comms plan, identifying the right team, and then really embracing and encouraging those early adopters and those champions. All of that's got to be pushed from leadership as well. They need to be seen to be bought in strategically and on the ground into this project. There will be a lot of investment going into it, and if leadership aren't driving that, then it's unlikely to see a return. All of the kind of comms that sit around that adoption plan as well are best delivered internally. That's why we put that team together that's got executive sponsors and champions and stakeholders. So we're happy to support with that process, but an external partner talking kind of directly to end users about the why and the purpose of the project isn't going to land as well as kind of excited internal champions. So make sure you celebrate those successes and reward those champions, and get them to be the voice of the project, and they'll bring everyone else along with them. So good adoption strategy has a massive impact on return on investment, both short-term and long-term. So immediately when the project goes live, that's when you're going to win or you lose your users, those first impressions moments. So it's important you've got champions there that are really making the system sing and getting everyone else bought into it. But also over the long term, once you've got that vision and purpose embedded in people, and they can see why they're using the system, they'll continue to use it. They'll continue to give constructive feedback, and you'll continue to improve and refine it over time. So massive value there. So yeah, we're happy to help as a partner with all of your adoption planning and execution and everything we've talked about today. So yeah, do get in touch if you want to hear more.